I want to just specifically open it up. I mean, we've been having a lot of discourse here now too, but you might have a question that you're thinking of and you'd like to ask, and I'd say, just to break it up a little bit so that you have the opportunity to do that. So.
On implementing the Personhood Amendment, if we do get it passed, from past experience and what you're saying, a lot of the problem is the courts, in that it's case law rather than constitutional law. Meaning that, you said the original decision of the Supreme Court was that basically gave the courts the right to decide based on previous cases rather than Constitution. Okay? And also you're talking, it seems like, about states' rights. You want to get this amendment passed in states. Okay? And there's a question of whether or not the federal law would overrule it. Okay, well, my question is, would you discuss the concept a little bit, possibility here of the concept of nullification? Okay? I know from personal experience, the courts don't like the idea of nullification. I've been called for jury duty, and all I have to do to get thrown off is to ask the judge, do I have to tell the jury about jury nullification, or are you going to? And that gets me thrown out right away.
It's a good tip for everyone here to get out of jury duty.
If you don't want jury duty, we'll just ask them that.
Right.
Again, for those of you who don't know, I ran across this a long time ago, being prosecuted for sitting in front of abortion mill doors under trespassing laws. Amen. And, if there had been any pro-lifers on the jury at all who knew about jury nullification, I could have walked. Right. Mm-hmm. Because what it says is that a juror has a constitutional right, and correct me if I'm wrong, a juror has a constitutional right to decide not only the facts of the case. Was I sitting in front of the door? Did a person in authority tell me to leave the property, and did I refuse? Those would be the facts. And they could decide, well, yeah, I was sitting in front of the door. Somebody did tell me to leave, and I refused to. Well, sir, so I'm guilty.
I wanted to make sure I was clear on you had two questions. One was the issue of nullification as far as the federal government in relation to the states.
Right.
And the first question was, again, I just want to reiterate it because I started thinking about juries.
I'm just saying that courts don't like the idea of nullification. Mm-hmm. The judges don't want the jury deciding on whether or not a law can be applied in any particular case. And a friend asked me about, she said she got called for jury duty. And I told her about jury nullification. And she went on the internet and she found an article written by some fellow, and I wish I could recall his name just recently, but he talked about that concept in relationship to states' rights. That not only a person on a jury, but also a state, because our Constitution gives the federal government power only in areas where the states have turned it over to them, or that they don't rule. Then the states also have the same power of nullification. If you can pass a personhood amendment, then you can basically tell the federal government, get out of this area of our concern. We're going to rule on it. You have no jurisdiction, with your laws in this area.
Can I just say that that's a really scary thought when it comes to having abortion illegal? Because, the truth is that you could have a jury who's just going to say, we're not going to find them guilty for homicide of this baby. Yeah. Okay, so that's,
Yeah. No. Nullification is in my opinion, it is a current legal theory. There was a professor in my law school who was very famous. He was a young man, and his big theory was jury nullification based on the overarching racial prejudice of American law. He was an African-American professor, and he said when a black man's convicted, the jury should look at the fact that our laws are racist. And, you know, as a lawyer, I think jury nullification and nullification in general leads to anarchy. It's dangerous that when you release it, I would say you can't control it. And, you know, I think that the aspect of personhood that I like is that you know, our end goal is not a state personhood amendment. I think the strongest way to protect the preborn would be a constitutional amendment that sort of like the 14th Amendment clarified, or, you know, really we shouldn't even need the 14th Amendment. You know, when it says life, when all humans are, you know, are created equal, all people are created equal, that should be enough, right? But unfortunately, we do need it. I think eventually a personhood amendment will be able, and this is why we work in places like California, where, you know, it's almost unfathomable, even though Pastor Hoy almost did perform a miracle there. We need to work everywhere because eventually we're going to pass a constitutional amendment. Eventually we want this to be the settled law of every state, not just Colorado, not just Kansas.
I agree with that, you know, and I'd like to see that. But if you do get one passed in Colorado, are you going to let federal law override it and nullify it?
We are clarifying, well, in Colorado, Colorado has a right to expand the rights of its citizens to protect people to a greater degree. So federal law can't infringe upon that because it respects the right of the state to do that. So there is no federal law. I mean, there's a Supreme Court opinion, but we're undermining that opinion by answering the question that they didn't answer, that they founded their whole case upon, which is, since we don't know, well, you do know, and this is a matter of fundamental rights, and you decided yours on due process. So
Maybe I...
Is that just for Colorado, or would all states have that right?
well, I mean, we're only, if you're talking just about an amendment to the state constitution of Colorado, you're not talking about Kansas. But you're just saying federal doesn't, I mean, we're talking about a state constitution.
If in Arizona I get a person, am I going to still have that same situation where, okay, person is here now, and I'm overriding the federal? Is that just for?
No, that's every state. Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, let's clarify here, and we have a couple complex issues, I think, here. Okay, thank you for the question.
Isn't that basically a form of nullification? If the state passes a law and you know, gives a person some rights, you know, some specific rights that the federal government are denying, then isn't that a form?
Okay. Well,
So the question would be, again, we'll just assert the fact that each state has the right, has greater police powers than the federal government. But in relation to exerting that sovereignty, would nullification be used, or would some other form of exerting that authority be used once we pass a personhood amendment?
Okay, this is not like playing like a child's game on the playground where, like, you know, you play a game of tag and everybody calls out, you know, not it, not it, not it. And it's like, oh, I called not it, you know, so like you can't, you know, I mean, it's not just like, oh, I'm calling nullification, so, you know, you can't touch me. It's like, it's not that simple, you know. This is going to be, without a doubt, a constitutional showdown of epic proportions. Hallelujah. Bring it on, you know? And let's fight it out. And the thing is that I love the fact that there is time, energy, and some money that's been invested, and that there's this huge grassroots movement, state by state, and that there is going to be an expectation that something will happen. And if they have the audacity to overturn it, or, you know, to try to undo what we've done, there will be huge outrage. Finally, waking up a sleeping giant, the majority in America, and then that will be when the time will be right to bring a federal constitution. I mean, I actually had a conversation with, well, you know, Dr. Wilkie, who I really very highly respect, but Right to Life of Michigan had talked him out of supporting the Personhood Amendment 4 years ago, and he said, well, I didn't know you didn't have Right to Life of Michigan support, you know, and then he starts talking to me about, you know, what they did with the Unity Amendment and the compromise back during the Reagan era, and we had the human life amendment and how, like, basically in their infinite wisdom that this is what they came up with and that you really need this strategy and do a federal amendment. And it's like, I was just baffled that he's sitting there talking to me about what was done a generation ago. And I'm thinking, so how's that working for you? When's the last time I heard anything about the human life amendment? I mean, it's been dead in the water. People think that this issue is dead. And what Personhood does is that it's working up this groundswell where we'll have hundreds of thousands of people in state to state. You'll have millions of people across the country who have signed this and who have invested energy, and they will expect something to happen. And then we will have our showdown.
And,
Guabe, let me just take a moment just to clarify again, and I think this might be a good exercise. Why don't, for the audience's sake, why don't we play it out? And why don't we play it out with November 3rd being the day? Tell me what November 3rd looks like in Colorado in relation to the federal, around the country after we pass Amendment 62.
November 3rd, probably even November 2nd before the polls close, if they see that we're going to win this, there'll be an injunction. Planned Parenthood will file a federal lawsuit and assert that this state amendment is unconstitutional. And we'll have a couple of years probably of legal battles it'll go up to the Supreme Court. Cal over there probably will be in jail within a couple of hours for blocking the entrance to an abortion clinic. God bless him. But I think that we'll see, regardless of what the Supreme Court decides, we'll see an acceleration of the fight for life with teeth. After Dred Scott, after the seminal decision against the human rights, civil rights of African Americans, it took, how many years was it? I think 57. It took about 5 years for the Civil War. That's the energy of having a tyrant really put the squeeze on the people. I was writing a piece recently, and the phrase, the tighter the tyrant's grip, the stronger the will of the people to be free. And so have the Supreme Court say that human beings are not persons. Have them just state that outright. And we're asking them that question. Personhood puts that question to them and doesn't let them wiggle out. Have them say that a whole class of human beings have no dignity. I think you'll see pro-lifers, start rising up. We have 51% of the country's pro-life, and there's this whole section of the population that's sort of wishy-washy pro-life. I don't think it'll be like that. I think you'll see people really standing up. And Pastor Hoy probably remembers the days when people started rising up for civil rights. And I think we're going to see that.